hello and welcome to our panel on Upgrade Your Brain and Mind for higher performance in all areas of your life. So we're delighted to have you here. My name is Claudia von Boeselager. I'm a biohacker, coach and founder of Longevity and Lifestyle. And I'd like to ask each of our speakers to give a brief introduction. Would you like to start, Sarah?
Sure. So I'm Sarah Turner. I'm the co-founder of CeraThrive, which is a transcranial and systemic photobiomodulation device.
Kayla?
I'm Kayla Osterhoff. I am a neuropsychophysiologist, which is a fancy way of saying that I study the brain and the mind, and I'm primarily on the side of research in health.
My name is Matt Gallant.
Your microphone's not on, I think.
Sorry. My mic's on. I'm Ken Davidov. I am a lifelong product developer. I started a company in 2008 that combines the human body with a mild electric current and the benefits that come from that. So it's an exciting time for my company, and glad to be at this event.
Matt, do you want to try?
Yeah, my name is Matt Gallant. I'm the CEO, co-founder of BiOptimizers and Utopia. I've been building companies since I'm 19. And yeah, I love helping people go from sick to superhuman. That's what we're here to do.
Perfect. Thank you for the brief introductions, everyone. So I'd like to move on to a group question, also in our panel. What, in your view, is the difference between the brain and mind? Why is upgrading both so important for peak performance? And what are your top 3 tips for each? So if each of you could give a quick answer to those questions. Mr.?
Okay, sure. I think this is a very interesting dichotomy, what is brain and what is mind, because in my view, things are starting now to come together a bit more, and people are starting to look at brain and mind together. Because brain, of course, we think of as the actual structure of the brain, the neurons, the proteins, and then mind may be something a bit more nefarious, like our emotions and consciousness. And I think what's very interesting, especially in photobiomodulation research, are people are starting to look at that together, like maybe the microtubules, which is a structure in the brain, could be the seat of consciousness. And how do you then blend that? And so I think certainly photobiomodulation, there's now a lot of research into consciousness. And with that comes group consciousness, individual consciousness. Of course, what are feelings? Could that be some kind of expression of what's going on in the brain? So top tips is, well, really it's, of course, getting back to nature. I think a lot of what these biohacks are doing is utilizing what we already know about nature. And certainly light with photobiomodulation is mimicking the sun. So, you know, getting up with sunrise, really being connected, and then utilizing these technologies to maximize that effect. So that's not 3 tips.
But they're excellent tips.
Yeah,
Thank you. Perfect. Yeah. Kayla, how about you?
Yeah, sure. Thank you for this question. I won't move too much. This is actually one of my favorite topics, and I give a keynote speech just on this very thing. It's the focus of my research and my doctoral program. So I believe that the human operating system is represented or encompasses 2 major systems that regulate the rest of it. Well, 3 hormones, which is something that I talked about in my earlier talk on women's neuropsychology. But for our discussion today, the 2 are the brain and the mind, which are 2 very different and separate systems that interact with each other. And you can think of the brain as the physical construct of human consciousness, we talked about this last night, and the mind as more of the, like you said, nefarious, it's not physical in nature. So the brain can be thought of as the hardware of the human operating system, and the mind is like the software of the human operating system. These are 2 extremely different and separate systems. However, they can't function without each other. So if you think about your computer, for instance, at home, your computer by itself, without any software, doesn't do anything. On the other hand, your software programs are meaningless without hardware to run on. So that kind of explains this interaction between the brain and the mind. And of course, there's a biochemical component, there's an electrical component, and there's a psychological component. And so the way to upgrade these systems is various ways. But I would say you want to focus on these 3 areas. The neuroelectricity. So this could be done through neurofeedback. And through the psychological component would be enhancing like your emotional intelligence, connecting with yourself. There are various ways to do it. And then on the neurological side, I would say the biggest hack that shouldn't be a hack, it should just be part of regular lifestyle, is quality sleep. Because our brain does not function without quality sleep. And so I guess those would be my 3.
Top tips. Perfect. Thank you. Matt, how about you?
Yeah, so the brain is the physical organ, and you can break that down, again, which would have the neuroelectrical, neurostructural, and neurochemical. The neurostructural things, the transcranial photobiomodulation, those are all great devices to help optimize that. Neurofeedback, which I've done about 7 weeks of my life with, probably the most powerful thing you can do to really optimize your neuroelectricity. And then Utopia, we optimize neurochemicals. So we'll talk a little bit more about that. But when you get all 3 optimized, your brain performance goes to a different dimension. As far as the mind, that's a little more difficult to describe. It's non-local. It's really our thought processes, our thought operating system. 2 key things. There's a great book called Seeking Wisdom, Munger to Darwin. It's a masterpiece. And that book will help teach you how to remove cognitive biases. And when we remove those, we make less dumb mistakes. The other thing we can do is learn mental models, which you'll also learn in that book. There's a great book called Great Mental Models. When you learn to just think better, you'll produce smarter decisions. And when you remove, again, cognitive biases, you'll make less dumb ones. And of course, the spiritual connection, which is the bridge to consciousness, is the last piece. For meditation as well as neurofeedback will help bridge you there. Thanks.
Perfect. Ken?
Okay. Well, I'll say whatever they just said was pretty incredible. I come from a different school of thought. This is my first biohacking conference, and it's amazing to meet all these people. I think for me and my idea of the brain is the physical part of it, that you're using for learning or for any kind of physical activity, and then the mind and mental health and how we react every day with our bodies and how we treat other people and your feelings and emotions. And I think that for me, it's been a really great journey to build a product that deals with both sides, the physical side and the mind, the mindfulness side. So I'll tell you more about my product when we get into the next question, but I would say my tips in general in terms of brain health or optimization would be a great diet, and that would be however we feel and how our brain feels. I think has a lot to do with what we eat, what we put into our body, and I think this conference shows a lot of the capabilities of what's out there. The other thing is exercising, and I do a lot of sweating. We have Dr. Theodore Schwartz, who's on our team, talks about 30 minutes a day of just sweating because it's really good for your brain. So that would be number 2. And number 3 is, focusing on today, focusing on the present. And, that won't make you anxious about tomorrow. So I think that's, we got to really take a good look at ourselves and really focus on what's going on today and not think about what may be or what could be in the future.
Wonderful tips. Thank you all so much. So let's move on to some specific questions. Kayla, what is your advice on how to promote neurogenesis, and what hacks can you recommend?
This is a really interesting question because there's a big difference between neurogenesis and neuroplasticity. And I think oftentimes, especially in the biohacking community, those two are lumped in together. And the reason why I'm a neuroscientist to begin with is because it's such an amazing field that we've only discovered about 5% of it. I say it's kind of like the ocean on Earth. There's so much more to uncover, and in fact, so much so that we actually didn't know that the human adult brain was capable of neurogenesis, which is the creation of new brain cells, new neurons, until like 8 years ago. That's a new discovery.
It's amazing, yeah.
And so promoting neurogenesis is very different than promoting neuroplasticity, whereas neuroplasticity is actually the wiring of the brain. It's neural pathways and changing and shifting those. So there are different things that can boost both. On the neurogenesis side, it's really about giving your brain the cofactors, the building blocks needed to create healthy neurons. And so omega-3s can be, and lipids in general, are very important because they create the membrane of the neuron as well as the myelin sheath of the neuron as well. So I would say that would be the biggest hack that you could take for neurogenesis, but also brain-derived neurotrophic factor, which I talked about in my talk earlier about women's neuropsychology, is really important for neurogenesis and neuroplasticity. So doing things that increase BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor, are important for neurogenesis and neuroplasticity. So doing things like a HIIT workout, for instance, or fasting can increase that neurogenesis. And for women specifically, because this is my passion area, as I mentioned in my talk earlier, during the luteal phase, which is the back half of the female hormone cycle, women have a couple of neurological things that happen that enhance their neurogenesis and neuroplasticity. And it has to do with progesterone, which sparks production of brain-derived neurotrophic factor, neuronal growth factor, and boosts neuroplasticity, as well as enhances GABA neurotransmitter activity. And so that's the, I call the grow phase, literally, because our brain is growing and our capacity to learn is enhanced during that phase for women.
Perfect, thank you. Matt, let's move on. As CEO of BiOptimizers and your recently launched ventures, Nootopia, can you tell us more about what nootropics actually are? Obviously, I think there's a lot of people here who are familiar with it, but for those that maybe are less familiar, and what the effect is on our brain chemistry and the benefits of it are.
Yeah, so we have neurochemicals in our mind. Anyone here ever struggle with procrastination? Yeah, afternoon crashes, energy crashes?
Yeah.
Lack of drive, lack of motivation. All of those things can be attributed to neurochemical deficiencies. You know, if you're lacking dopamine, you're not going to be able to drive yourself and keep going and doing hard things. Dopamine is the key molecule that we need. And almost everyone that's hyper successful has very strong genetic dopamine systems. Now the cool thing is we can use nootropics to optimize that. Acetylcholine, which is the molecule of focus, if you're deficient in that, you'll be struggling to maintain focus on even a small task. So if you can optimize your acetylcholine, you can maintain focus for hours, and it's a game changer in terms of getting things done. Serotonin, it'll help stabilize your mood. It makes you a better human being, higher emotional intelligence. So any one of those deficiencies compromises your ability to be the best version of yourself. With nootropics, we can optimize all of those, and there's many other ones, anandamides, noradrenaline, adrenaline. All of those things, if they're at the right ratios, will help you become the best version of yourself on a daily basis. That's what we do at Nootopia. We personalize every single order. You fill out an intake form, then we customize every single order. Every single order, all these different stacks that do different things are optimized based on your neurochemistry. And it's a game changer. You know, no more bad days.
May I add one thing to that?
Sure.
For the women, it's really, really, really important to know that men and women are cognitively different, and especially when you're choosing your nootropics, to consider this one very important thing. The neuroregulator for men is dopamine. The neuroregulator for women is oxytocin. Oxytocin is one you didn't mention, but it is the most important neurotransmitter for women specifically and will regulate the other neurotransmitter activity. For men, dopamine will regulate the other neurotransmitter activity, and you're exactly right. Dopamine is mostly what is represented in the research because the research is done on men. But women represent a huge scientific gap, and that's why we don't see a lot of research in this area. So for men, it's all about optimizing dopamine. And for women, it's all about optimizing oxytocin, which is going to regulate your serotonin, which, as you mentioned, is that mood stabilizer.
And oxytocin, you can just hug your pets, hug your life, your loved ones. Sorry, some technical difficulties.
Yes. And
Does your customization include also for women? Does it make that differentiation or not yet?
Yeah, no, we're big on hormone optimization as well. We're working on some female hormonal stacks because, you know, as we know, testosterone is an incredible molecule as well for drive, for aggression, for facing tough obstacles, and for women it's very different. So yeah, we are working on that.
Great. Okay. Sarah, let's move on and talk about photobiomodulation, specifically red and near-infrared light therapy for brain health. Can you explain what red light therapy is, particularly around the benefits for brain health, and what the impact on the brain and gut connection is?
Sure. So I think we've had a lot this weekend about red light. You know, red light, most biohackers know about red light, and there's a theory, there's several theories about actually how it works. And mainly people talk about the mitochondria and an enzyme, cytochrome C oxidase, but actually I think there's a lot more to it than that. And I think actually we're really at the cutting edge of this kind of research where people are really starting to look at, you know, the body is covered in light receptors actually. And the body is also a connected system. You know, no one thing works in isolation. And that's why actually the whole mind-body connection is interesting, because not even that works in isolation. You know, we don't have this.
It's one systematic view.
It's a system within systems within systems.
Yeah.
And so firstly, I was very interested in this kind of systemic use of photobiomodulation for the brain, because, you know, historically it is fairly difficult to get light into the brain. We don't know how much light is actually penetrating the cranium. There are a lot of things that block light to the brain. So, you know, if you're using some kind of device, if hair will scatter the light, you know, skin pigment, different ages, you know, you have different densities of skull. So using a remote location for the brain is something that now is being investigated more. And the reason why for my device I'm also targeting the gut and the brain is because there's some excellent data on a mouse model of Alzheimer's, where actually they did some experiments where they irradiated the gut, they irradiated the brain, they got a good effect on the mouse model of Alzheimer's, but actually if you do both together you get the best effect by far.
Why is that, do you think?
So there are several reasons why I think that that's happening. Firstly, it could just be a blood irradiation effect. You know, you're just irradiating a lot of the blood, and sooner or later that's going to end up in the brain. The other thing is vagal tone. You know, there's a lot of stuff about vagal tone, and people are doing some fascinating research, and they're looking at heart rate variability and how you can improve that with the red light. So there's probably something to that. You know, you are actually irradiating the vagus nerve, and then that's having this positive effect on the brain. There's a new field called photobiomics, where people are looking at what's the effect of the microbiome when you irradiate it with light, because really mitochondria are almost like a bacteria. It's a bacteria that has a symbiotic relationship with a cell, and we've kind of utilized that relationship for our energy production. So it's no surprise, of course, that the microbiome respond to light. So now there's some fascinating studies looking at, certainly with mouse models, but now in clinical trials, positive effect on the gut microbiome. Microbiome, of course, is linked to Parkinson's disease, Alzheimer's disease, to mood disorders. Most
diseases, actually, yeah.
And also, like I said, you know, the mechanisms, it's becoming very, very interesting, because people are now starting to look at things like biophotonic emission. You know, so our cells don't only receive light, they also output light. You know, our cells are putting out light, very ultra low frequencies, but they are putting out frequencies. So what is the implication there? Maybe that's some kind of field effect in the brain.
Fascinating.
Yeah, it's I could go on forever because there is actually so much new research that's coming out, new mechanisms of action, new ways that our bodies are potentially working. Maybe that fits in with some quantum theories about how the brain and the body works.
And the connection.
Yes. So the device. So I've kind of formulated a device that utilizes that systemic effect. So you have a light panel that goes over the gut, but you also do have a direct stimulation of the brain. And one of the interesting things that I'm looking at is this effect of water and how water affects what's going on in the brain, because our bodies are mainly water, and especially the brain. And so when you shine light on water, we have this effect. And I think we have some people talking about Jerry Pollack's work, easy water. And if you have light shining on a hydrophilic surface, that you actually change the structure of that water. This changes the viscosity inside the cristae of the mitochondria, so potentially you're getting more of this ATP because the ATPase can work more efficiently, but also protein folding, which of course is implicated in neurodegeneration. Protein folding depends on the structure of the water around the protein, because you have these charged parts of a molecule, and that will change depending on what's going on with the water around it. So
yeah, exciting space.
Yes,
yeah,
very, yes.
Wonderful, thank you, Sarah. Ken, let's talk about neuroplasticity and how neurostimulation through devices like your Liftid neurostimulation device can impact things like focus, attention, alertness for higher performance.
Okay. Well, Liftid is a transcranial direct current stimulation device that uses a mild electric current that passes through 2 electrodes. We place it up on this frontal lobe area, and we target this area that's known for cognitive benefit, focus, attention, memory, productivity, and performance. It's a part of the brain that's well known for this area, so that's why I developed and designed this device. I wanted to make it simple to use, and I also made it a nodal. A nodal meaning that it's a positive, it's excitatory. So it's exciting the neurons, and it is, that's what gets focus and attention going. But you also can inhibit and suppress neurons by cathodal current. So we built our device this way. So what you do is you use Liftid once a day for 20 minutes, and that is what induces over time what they call neuroplasticity, which is the brain's ability to learn and adapt and reorganize itself. But if you're using Liftid or any kind of transcranial direct current stimulation device, you're using it with a task. So like if you were to go out and get some coffee, or you were feeling sluggish and you reach for a sugary snack, you are doing this because maybe you want to finish a spreadsheet or edit some photos or whatever. Liftid gives you that same sort of boost, that same sort of energy that you would need to fight through what you're doing without having to put a chemical into your body. So, I mean, I'm a coffee drinker. I drink coffee once a day, but if I take coffee out in the middle of the day when I really don't, and I use like Liftid and I use a TDCS device, not only am I taking something out of my body that I don't need, but also I'm getting better at what I'm doing. So if I'm doing, so that's where neuroplasticity comes in, that you're training the brain is actually adapting, and it's understanding that those neurons that are firing together, that they're wired together, and that they're going to get better at what you're doing. It's like a training the brain. So over time, if you use Liftid when you need it, or every day for that matter, you'll get better at your task, and the after effects are longer lasting. So where you use it for 20 minutes and you think, oh, am I going to get 20 minutes after this? Well, we have people that use it for an hour, or for an hour or 2 hours or 3 hours afterwards, that get the same benefit of that energy, and they don't get the crash that comes with it when you're drinking caffeine or eating a snack. So I think there is a place for these devices and all of the other nootropics and all the things that are out there. If you're really in tune with your body, you can use all of these devices and and the supplements and all kinds of things to maximize your day and your health. So I would say we're all in this together, and it's awesome.
It's a team effort. It's very exciting. I'd like to move on to a group question for everybody. What is the most exciting thing that you see happening in the biohacking space, say in the next 2 to 5 years? Matt, why don't we start with you?
I'm super excited about becoming a transhuman. So genetic upgrades, brain to computer interfaces. I love what Elon is doing with Neuralink. I think the Neuralink is going to be an absolute game changer. First of all, we can create constant feedback loops with what's happening with our minds. So these feedback loops, whether it's electrical or other things that we're not measuring, it gives us the ability to learn in real time. It's the difference between a constant glucose monitor versus pricking your finger. You know, when you see a constant stream of data, you get way more insights. It's like an Oura ring. You know, my deep sleep used to be garbage, and then you know, I started changing little things, and you get feedback loops, and you see that it works. So I think in the technology biohacking space, as we create these sensors that gives us constant data streams, whether it's blood markers, hormones, brain, it's going to transform our ability to optimize our health.
For sure. Very exciting. Ken, what do you think?
Well, first of all, I think that this is my first biohacking conference. I think it's an awesome community. I think that as somebody that's in sales with products, I hope this community really grows. I think it's going to grow at just incredible numbers because they are accepting of everybody's technology. And I think that's something you don't see in other trade shows or other events because people are skeptical about these things. But this is the great thing about this particular community is that I see that. But also, I also see that, you know, we've come, all of us here we know what working with your hands and manual labor and what machines and all the things that have driven the economy before us. Now, as you can see, there's this massive shift to the digital economy, and that's sitting in front of a computer and staring at that computer all day. And you see the importance of how important brain function and alertness and just moving your fingers and what that's going to mean. So I think that that's something that biohacking embraces, and I see that that's another big challenge because all of us are in front of our screens, and that's where the digital economy is now. So
Sure.
I think it's something.
Thanks. Kayla?
Yeah. The thing I'm most excited about is to see more female scientists like myself and women leaders step into this field and bring attention to something that the biohacking community has been ignoring up until now and still largely does ignore, which is the recognition that feminine biology is much different than male biology. And these significant differences are not well represented in the research. So it's a job, it's a responsibility of the biohacking community until the scientific community catches up and our medical community catches up. It's our responsibility to bring forward this education and this information to promote female health and also shine light on where it's not done appropriately. Like, just for one example, within the biohacking community, there's a big problem with recommendations for women not being tailored to the fact that a woman is physiologically, neurochemically, and biochemically 4 different people over the course of a month. So one diet or one supplement or one kind of technology is not going to cut it for women all throughout the month. So it's really a tailoring. So I'm excited to see that really come to the forefront.
And so would you say the first step is for women to recognize that and understand it, and then next to look for it and proactively push that
Absolutely.
with their doctors, etc.?
Yeah, so it starts with each one of us. And that's why I'm so excited to be here with all of these amazing women leaders, because it starts with you. You understand your biology, you understand your biorhythm, you start living in alignment and in partnership with your female biology, And then by example, you're already going to impact other people, but then you can take that and infuse it into your offerings. And that's why I'm offering this education and this certification in the female biorhythm for doctors, practitioners, and coaches, because it's a huge blind spot and it's absolutely fundamental and necessary for everyone in the medical biohacking health community to have this basic understanding of female health and biology.
And also to live in an optimized peak state, right?
Yeah.
Sarah, how about you? What are your thoughts?
For the future, well, from my point of view, I think it's very interesting that people are starting to talk a lot more about consciousness, spirituality, energies, things like that in relation to biohacking and biology.
Yeah.
And I think this cross-discipline approach that's in the biohacking, that's something for me is very exciting because it enables things to progress faster. You know, if you're trying, and also all the self-monitoring, you know, so if you have that combination of people from all different disciplines can then come together and look, okay, the consciousness people are looking at biophotonic emission, how does that relate to biology? How can we apply that to the therapy? You know, for me, that's fabulous to see. And I think that's important, and that's probably what's gonna like push the biohacking crowd a little bit forward and maybe even ahead of the scientists, which, you know,
the collaborative approach.
Yeah, they can then catch up.
Excellent.
Yeah.
I'd like to also ask you if you have any parting thoughts or messages for the audience on optimizing your brain and mind for peak performance. So Sarah, why don't we start with you?
Well, my parting thoughts are a lot of the biohacking stuff now is, it's not, you know, the message is not new. You know, really, I was talking to someone, and here in the States, there's a focus on technology. In Europe, there's a much more a focus on nature cure. So, you know, there needs
homeopathy,
to be,
yes, exactly.
Yeah, or even mushrooms and forest,
okay.
and, you know,
Yeah.
so I think really, you know, that is the fundamental piece. You know, really, your biohacking, if you're getting up, you're seeing the sunrise, you know, you are having healthy relationships, getting good sleep, you know, that's an easy message. And then all of this other stuff is like icing on top, but then you can really start to get granular.
So getting the fundamentals in place.
Yeah, just getting the fundamentals and really having fun, like community, because I think, yeah, we're having to see a different kind of community, but let's not lose that. Let's really not lose that piece, because that's humanity. And I think we're being steered a little bit away from that, which is a bit worrying. So it's good to see everyone here and having gatherings. So for me, you know, that's the most amazing part.
We're in person here today.
We're doing it.
Wonderful.
Yes.
Kayla, how about you?
Yeah, again, I'm going back to this gap in health science for women because it's so essential to all of our work. Half of our clientele is women. And so we can't just ignore them and treat them as if they're men and as if their biology is the same. So what I would love to see is a greater focus on the female biorhythm, all 4 phases of it, the physiological and biochemical signature of each of the 4 phases, and mapping our biohacking routines into that. And just for instance, just here on this panel, I can already see amazing opportunities to apply each of these products within each phase to promote the physiological benefits and changes within each phase that are already occurring, and in a way that won't be harmful. So I'm excited for more collaboration with folks like all of you and these innovative technologies, infusing the science and research and bringing in the female biorhythm. And then for any of the women who are interested in learning a little bit more about female neuropsychology and the female biorhythm, you can check out herbiorhythm.com. I have a lot of great information there. And then if you email me, I can send you a ebook that I wrote that gives a basic understanding of this, BIOCURIOUSKayla@gmail.com. And I would love to connect with any of the, especially women leaders here, and any of the innovators that want to start to tailor your offerings to women in a really profound and impactful way. I would love to speak to you as well.
Well, speak to me after, because we're going to do it. I've used everything that everybody's talked about. I hit a rock bottom when I was 32 on alcohols and drugs, and my brain was severely damaged. So one of the first things I did was photobiomodulation. Then I started playing with transcranial stimulation, neural feedback, started using nootropics. I was able to, they all work. You know, that's a very important point, is you compound these things. Don't ask yourself, do these things work or not? It's, they do, you know, which one are you going to do? And you try one at a time, and you keep stacking these new technologies and habits, and your life transforms. So as far as our products, my suggestion is go to the BiOptimizer booth, give Newtopia a shot. The feedback we're getting, people's lives are being transformed. We have some of the top people in Hollywood using the products. It's a high performer. If you make money using your brain, it's a no-brainer, no pun intended.
Which is
so,
everybody.
Thanks.
Awesome group, and really a pleasure meeting you guys. We're developing products that use the human body and a mild electric current. We not only did a TDCS device, but we just came out with the first eating utensil with built-in electronics that enhances taste and neutralizes aftertaste. As you know, the brain has a lot to do with taste, and how instantaneously your taste can change just from eating. So we found that getting new products, we have a toothbrush called Hygienius that really pulls plaque. All of this is a mild current that's running through the body to help the body. So, you know, in terms of the brain and how it connects everything that we do, whether it's brushing our teeth or eating or using our minds, I'm going to keep developing products. That's my niche, like everybody has their niche, that use this mild current because there is a benefit. And like you said, all of these products work, and that's a real great thing. And to have a community that welcomes all of us, that's important to me. So I am going to keep doing my thing, and you can find us at getlifted.com and spoontech.com and gethygienius.com, or come by our booth and say hi. So anyway, thanks.
Excellent, thank you. Are there any questions from the floor for our panel? Great. Sure.
I would like to know which level of feedback you recommend.
So as you were talking about, biofeedback is the future of health and technology, and it's super exciting that we're having all these kinds of devices. I personally, the one that I use every single day is BioStrap, and I'm a little partial because I'm a scientist. Data is king, and their quality is the best data quality out of all the wearables out there. I like this one and any of the ones that offer heart rate variability specifically because that is the greatest metric to understand how well rested you are and your stress threshold, your stress capacity. So I think that's the most important biometric because it can tell you about your sleep, the quality of your nervous system, and your metabolism as well. And it's linked in with your cardiovascular system and your respiratory system. So that would be my recommendation. I am coming out, I can't announce too much about it, but I am coming out with some femtech next year that will be specifically tracking the female biorhythm using physiological parameters mapped on to the 4 phases of the female biorhythm to tell you exactly where you are. And the biofeedback part will be telling you exactly what that means for your brain function, for your metabolism, and your physiological status.
I've been to BioCybernaut, which is in Sedona. It's a great place. They're really incredible at processing trauma. I've been to 40 Years of Zen 5 times. This is Dave Asprey's facility in Seattle. It's also phenomenal. There's an incredible commercial headset coming out called Sense.ai, SENS.ai is how you spell it. And I've been waiting for this for 5 years. You're going to be able to train and do neurofeedback on a plane. It's dry EEGs, no more goop. If you've ever done the goop, you know what I'm talking about. It's awesome. So the technology is just getting better and better.
You mean neurofeedback?
Yeah, it's a neurofeedback
Sensing.
device. You just put on a headset, mobile, go. So that's coming out, I think, early next year.
I think we had another question over here.
Where does the mind come in? So we talked about the mind connection. Where does the impetus to talk about the mind come from, and what kind of things have you guys been exposed to that said, hey, we need to talk about the mind, we're talking about human performance? Because it's kind of ethereal and not very scientific, I guess you might say. So I'm curious how you guys got there.
Sarah, would you like to take the question?
Yeah, well, say it's ethereal, but I think from my point of view, the fascinating thing is now people are trying to study that. You know, if you look at people like in the University of Arizona, they have their science of consciousness there, and they're really trying to see, okay, is it something to do with the quantum state of proteins in the microtubule, for example? You know, is there an actual physical site where you have consciousness? And if you could start to imagine that, then you can start to look at all the other aspects of mind and start to look at, okay, is there a physical correlate to that? Or, you know, is this something that is more spiritual and, you know, you have to go to a different place? But from my point of view, with quantum physics, now you can really almost start to get to a point where you can see how some of these processes might be working, because, you know, that's the science of it, really, isn't it? That's the interesting piece. And things like biophotons, you know, what is light, really? You know, light is this kind of mystical thing that we don't really know what it is. Is that some kind of aspect of consciousness? Because the body's constantly receiving and emitting light. You know, there are people who are actually actively looking at that as a function of, this could be how we perceive consciousness. This could be almost like how we have a group consciousness, because of course we're emitting and receiving biophotons between us too. So, you know, I'm kind of coming back down again to the science piece, I know, but I think that this division between body and mind is getting less and less the more research that we do on it. And maybe there's a bit we'll never get to, because how can you understand the mind with the mind, you know? Obviously we have a limitation there. But
I would argue that you cannot look at the brain and mind without considering the other. Because as I mentioned, the mind is the software. It doesn't work without the brain, the physical. And the physical, the brain, does not work without the software either, which is the mind. And there's a whole field of science that's very well established on the mind, which is psychology. And neuropsychology is an ever-growing field, and where the neuropsychology is the interaction between the two. And so really, in my opinion, you should not really speak to one without the other.
Great question. Anyone else? Yeah? Well, there's a microphone coming.
Earlier, Kayla talked about women's cycles and a time during those cycles when there was a period for intuition.
Yeah.
Are there any other biohacking tips for all of us, male or female, for accessing intuition and knowing that that's the word intuition versus gender?
Great question.
In my experience, when you do neurofeedback and you focus on theta, which is a much slower brainwave, and you learn to energize your brain and not pass out, which in the beginning is what most people do. Joe Dispenza talked about it and says, you know, your body's asleep, but your mind's awake. You know, we hit that every day. Once when we start passing out at night and you're starting to become conscious of your dreams, or in the morning. So if you can learn to energize your brain in that state and learn to guide it a little bit, in my opinion, it's the place where your intuition is the best. You're downloading just information at a level of clarity that you can't access otherwise. So that's my thoughts.
Yeah.
In the scientific literature, you won't find intuition, that term, used. The term is cognitive empathy, as we talked about earlier. So the research on cognitive empathy is not just focused on women, although women have an enhanced capacity for cognitive empathy, especially in the menstruation, phase 1 of the female hormone cycle. So if you want to learn more about the research done on intuition, use the keyword cognitive empathy, and it's exactly what you were talking about. The key to it is presence. It's becoming present. Pay attention, and that's how you enhance your intuition at the very basic level. And exactly what you're talking about, meditation, right before you fall asleep. Why is that happening? Why is that theta state coming online? Because you're becoming present in your body. You're not distracted by life and the world going on around you. We all have a great capacity for high levels of intuition. Most of us are just not paying attention.
Yeah, so the theta state, if you study brainwaves. Yeah. Any other questions? No, I think it's lunchtime, so thank you so much, everyone. For, is there one more question?
Thank
I think
you.
we could do some work.
Thank you so
Thank
much.